Good afternoon to all of you, and I'm really honored to have you here. Well, David, you want to begin, please?
Of course I will, Joseph. Well, I will echo Joseph's welcome to the program today. We are the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group. That name is very apt. We do believe here at SDIG that inclusivity and lack thereof is a matter of systemic causes. And that includes what we're going to talk about today within the education field as well. Our mission here at SDIG is a diversity and inclusion mission. More specifically, however, our goal is to foster peace, equity, and social justice, which seems like a very big bite to take, but nonetheless, we believe that's why this group exists. And furthermore, this group exists to foster peace, equity, and social justice through dialogue. Dialogue, of course, being a means to raise awareness, and believing, of course, that awareness is what causes change. And so in our way, in our own way, this way, having discussions like this is how we fulfill that mission. Today, we're talking about education. As I said, that's a great fit for what we do. Education is a mode of awareness. And as I said, it's a systemic location where diversity and inclusion is not always present, and we need to be conscious of. So we do have a wonderful program today. I don't know if any of you are first-time viewers to our programs, but please, please, please follow us. We are in the process of building a more active membership. We're looking at ways to call that membership and to offer benefits to our membership. So please stay tuned. We're always interested in anyone wanting to help. I mean, again, this is a grand mission we have to foster peace, equity, and social justice. It would seem a mission that everyone would like to get behind. So, we welcome all volunteer assistance in fulfilling that mission. And we're also at this time looking for partners, organizational partners, to join us and support this mission as well. With that being said, again, this is my welcome to you. I know you're going to enjoy the program. It's a great program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our founder, Dr. Joseph Nawawi. Take yourself off mute, Joseph. Dr. Nawawi is still on mute.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, please.
All right. Good afternoon to all of you. I guess some of you may be in a place where we could say safely good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Know that I'm greeting. I want to thank all the people that are here, especially Future, Joseph, and Elizabeth, whom we will be hearing from today. But before we get to them, I just want us to reflect or think of what this month is about. When we talk about Black History Month, it reminds us of our commitment to reflect the contributions of African Americans, perhaps see it in a way other than the single stories we've always had, which one of our own said that, in her speech, she said, the danger of single story. So we're gonna have to try to begin to tell multiple stories that help to explain our locations at different times and where we are today. So without going too much into the stories, let me just put it this way. The program today is quite simple. It's gonna be like 3 parts. The first part is that the panelists whom I just named would introduce themselves, provide us as much information as they can as to what they're doing, their fields, especially when we talk about education or systemic issues related to education. I say that because I firmly believe that the only way to change this world to foster peace, equity, and social justice for all is through education. Incidentally, these people presenting today or talking today are all educators. So to that effect, I would like you to state what you are doing, tell us how it relates to the African American issues, especially in education, and then if you could, tell us how your view aligns with systemic diversity as David has articulated. So without taking more time, let's go to Future, who was instrumental to this particular group.
Hello and good afternoon from where I am located in Wisconsin. My name is FutureCain. I am a mom. I think that's important because I have 2 elementary school children that I am on the front lines fighting for. In addition to that, I work at the state level, putting systems in place through a permanent equity lens in regards to social and emotional learning and mental health. And I also have my own LLC. I see us aligning because I agree with you, Dr. Nwame, that education is the key for ourselves and for the younger generations to erode and recreate systemic racism and move forward to where we all can live and breathe and celebrate each other. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Why don't we go to Joseph, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Conkey. I work here in Wisconsin as the statewide coordinator for coaching. And I think this role is pivotal because the intersection of equity work, because I often think of the old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I think historically in education, we've depended a lot on consultants, especially around equity work, but I really see some power in coaching. Coaches partner with individuals, teams, and systems to think about what it means to disarm, disrupt, deconstruct, and then reconstruct new systems that are more inclusive. And this also intersects with partnering with teams and systems as they really begin to interrogate curriculum and what it could look like to provide more inclusive curriculum for all students.
Thank you so much. And I think it's fitting here to just echo your sentiment. You can take a horse to water, but you cannot make it to drink it. And I say that because we are all in this together. We know what educators may say about learning. Some say you gotta get to where students is in order to move the person to where you want the person to go. And if you do that, everyone will succeed. The question is, do we get to where all our students is? Or rather, all our students are rather, in order to move them to where we want them to go. Now, if we go to where they are we willing, with able-bodied, prepared teachers to move them to where we want them to go? I mean, all of them, or do we orchestrate it for some and leave others out? And that I'll leave to those of you who are in curriculum and instruction to begin to tackle, as I know you have been tackling. Now, we're gonna go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I was trying to do this thing and I found that we had some glitches this morning, but I was able to remember your name because I have a sister by name Elizabeth. So by association, I could get your name right away. All right, take it away.
Well, Dr. Noari, I have even more of a connection because my husband's name, as Future knows, my husband's name is Joseph, and my son's name is Joseph also. So we're all connected here. So my name is Elizabeth Leiba, and I am a 20-year veteran of higher education. I taught for a short time in K through 12, but the majority of my career has been spent in higher education, I've worked at more than probably a dozen schools, mostly dealing with marginalized students. So typically those students are non-traditional. So not at a state school or elite school, but more of community colleges, career schools, non-traditional schools for working adults. And when we say adults, usually they're in their 20s, so they're not necessarily straight out of high school. They may have taken some community college classes and not been successful, gone into the workforce, and now are looking to upskill or reskill. So that traditionally would be nursing, medical assisting, criminal justice, business, IT, those kinds of hands-on programs, which typically result in receiving a diploma or an associate degree, not necessarily a 4-year college degree. So my primary lens in terms of my experience in the classroom, I started in admissions as a recruiter and then pivoted to the classroom after about a decade working in higher education. And my primary experience has been primarily as a faculty member working with that demographic of student. And one thing I found in becoming more active and aware of how, as a country, we need to wrestle with some of the issues surrounding social justice was with the lynching that we all saw live on television of George Floyd. And it really propelled me to be more vocal in using my voice as an advocate for change in this country. And I do believe, as Future mentioned, and also Dr. Nawari, that education is a key. From being in this sector for so long, some people tend to feel as though maybe education has become undervalued, but I still definitely believe in whatever form we educate, there has to be some level of understanding, because if you don't understand something or even acknowledge something, you can't change it. So I became very vocal on social media over the past year. Along with Future, we were featured in a New York Times article about those that are on LinkedIn and other social media advocating for social justice. I also wrote an op-ed piece for CNN Online, where they published that piece about racial profiling, as I was racially profiled and arrested when I was 19 years old, and wanted to put a spotlight on racialization, criminalization of our young Black and brown children. As far as educating and being more of an advocate for education, I recently started the Black History and Culture Academy with micro-learning about Black history, because as Dr. Nawari said, I think that a lot of people are just unaware. They don't have any form of knowledge about Black history. It's woefully lacking. I had a Reddit Ask Me Anything forum this morning, and on the forum, someone asked me, what do we need to do better? And my response was that there's no national curriculum or set of standards for teaching Black history. Only a small number of states, including Arkansas, Florida, Illinois, Mississippi, and New York, have laws that require Black history be taught in public schools. 7 states do not mention slavery in their state standards. 8 states do not mention the civil rights movement. Only 2 states mention white supremacy, and 16 states, incorrectly, I might add, list states' rights as a cause of the Civil War. And I've seen that myself as an educator, both in K through 12 and in college, that I've seen it with my own eyes in textbooks. And that's wrong. We need to find ways to meaningfully address this. I posted on LinkedIn about a week ago and asked people, had you ever taken a Black history course, either in K through 12 or in college? And of the 777 respondents, 52% said they had never taken a Black history course, either in K through 12 or in college. That means, just from that random sample in this informal survey, that 50% of the people out there are woefully uneducated about Black history and the experience of Black folk in America, and that needs to change.
Thank you so much. There is a saying that goes, those who win wars tend to tell the stories. And when they tell these stories, they tell it not necessarily in all the contexts, but they tell the story that favors them. And that's why I truly believe that our best chance will come from educators. And when I say that our best chance will come from educators, I mean to say they have to begin to draw the power of the multiple stories. The curriculum specialists should begin to look at curriculum in context of consumer orientation, not necessarily what they may have to teach for a first grade class, but to begin to look at what are the experiences of their first grade students. And when you do that, then you cater to the needs of those students. I can tell you that if businesses continue to produce goods, just as during the Industrial Revolution, thinking that everybody will get their goods, they will fail, and they will fail woefully. Therefore, I think that teachers, educators should begin to model consumer orientation. Don't just get to your class and say, hey, I'm teaching fourth graders. Because some of these fourth graders may be operating at first grade level, and some may well be operating at fourth, where they're supposed to be, and others at higher level. Become aware that there are people who are in different locations in the trajectory of whatever your academic preparation you may want to take your students. So operate in that way so that you can meet the needs of all students and move them from where they are to where you may want them to go. So I really appreciate those comments. Now, let me have Joseph, I see that you're in administration, and I like the idea of coaching. Now, looking at the coaching, could you reflect on how the coaching has helped you not only to understand the principles of coaching and the kind of goal you might set, how would you reflect that to the issues of today? That is the fact that African Americans are usually not in where they are supposed to go be academically, perhaps because of lack of prior foundational preparations that they will lack and therefore could not move forward. Could you tell us as a coach how you have conceptualized it in your operation, perhaps transfer that knowledge into dealing with the issues we have today?
Sure, Dr. Nawali. I think the biggest thing that comes up for me is at the state level, we are committed to develop a definition of coaching for coaches across the state, whether they're coaching individuals, teams, or systems. And in that commitment, we are moving right now. We've always said that we want to hold equity at the center of our coaching, but we have not been explicit in naming that, stating it, defining it. So we're currently working with a team to bring that to the definition of coaching. And embedded in that is just calling on coaches that whatever coaching conversation you enter into, when you're working with an educator, it should be entered with the equity mindset. So how, as a coach, can you begin to work with individuals as they examine their biases and not only disrupt them, which I think is one thing we kept spinning on, is that I notice in Wisconsin, we're doing a better job, I feel, in education about noticing these things, but then how do we move to action? I think that's where we're missing the mark right now. So I think coaches are really well positioned as they partner with educators to first notice and disarm, but then also what does that mean to change your behavior, to change your mindset and move it towards action. So that's how I see coaches coming into play in just supporting the work, not only with individual educators, but teams and systems as well. I just want to speak briefly to the systems part of that, is because I think that's where the most power is. In Wisconsin, we're really moving coaches not away, but not just towards, but also towards systems. So a big part of that is positioning coaches to lean in on conversations when there's policies being made at the at district levels, and think through how those policies and that the curriculum choices that are being made, how those have been exclusionary and harmful to historically marginalized students, families, and communities. Dr. Nuau, I think you're muted if you're speaking.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying thank you so much for putting it so well. is action. Sometimes we hear these wonderful stories as to what we are doing, but when you go there, it's really a wash. I can tell you that my research was in the area of policies and practices. And during my research, I used four dimensions to investigate. The first one was survey, which everybody will give you what they think you want. The second one was my personal observation. The third one was content analysis, where I can look for what you told me that you have. Like, I have policies. Well, show me the beef. And oftentimes they didn't have it. Then the final one, which exposed those who were actually doing what they said they're doing and those who did not, was when I went into personal interviews. I interviewed superintendents, principals, teachers, librarians, and other areas associated with that. And what I found was, by and large, that they're not serious. So I get the sense of what you said, what you meant when you say action. The action is not there. And unfortunately, those who suffer the most are not finding ways to get out of the situation they find themselves, because everything is relatively power driven. Thank you so much. And Future, you had told me your stories. You are very unique because you could bring the bicultural aspects of it. You know who may have gone through hell, you know who may have had it well, and you have been on both sides. So with that, could you tell us, with all you've been doing, what drives you, and how could you mobilize massive number of teachers, educators, to follow the path you are following? Because I think, quite frankly, that's the only way. And I also may add that issue of diversity should be issues for all of us. Whether you're white, brown, pink, or whatever the color is, it's incumbent upon you to do all you can to foster peace, equity, and social justice. And if you're in education, this is your time to do something. So down the road, you can reflect and say, you know what? I did all I could. Okay, Future, go ahead.
Okay, what drives me? You know, we talk about this a lot, Dr. Nawade. The seeds that I'm planting, I know I may not ever see them. I know that. So what drives me is a force that it's not about me. It's about my children. It's about my grandchildren that I don't even know yet because my kids are in elementary school. So a thought of being a parent isn't even a thought right now. It is about living through a system which has done a disservice. And I see the effects and the impacts that it's having on people, whether it's academically, whether it's health-wise, whether it's financial success, whether it's hitting a glass ceiling in jobs. So I would say that is what drives me to leave this world a better place than what I came into it. The other thing that I do know and realize is that for educators, you, in a way, took an oath, and you took an oath to serve every child before you. And you took an oath to serve every child equally before you, to make them see the potential in themselves and to help them thrive, not just survive. So as educators, you have to hit on the hearts and minds of yourself. And I often say, and Liz knows this, I tell people to sit with themselves. And I'm very serious about that, because if you can't sit with yourself and the pain in which you have to sit with to say, what have I done as a person? What actions have I taken? What actions have I not taken? What words have I used? What words have I not used? How have I helped this work, even though it may not impact me directly? How have I helped to make this world a better place for all people? And I think some people are silently standing by, not doing anything because they can't see the impact on themselves. But the reality is we saw the impact this past year. And there's two realities that people are living in. And if you care about humanity, then you say, I want to do something. So therefore, the educators need to sit with themselves first to understand their bias and actions that they can take, because equity is action. So what actions are you taking in the classroom, in your family, to help educate yourself to know where your past is? Because if you have no idea of the past, you will harm the people in the present. The other thing I would say is, with educators and educational leaders, we have to look at the systems in which we've created. And that's going to take courageous people. And it will take educators, because maybe your educational leaders aren't doing things that you know are right. So it's going to take educators speaking up to say, I'm on the front lines with these children in the classroom, and here's what they're telling me. Here's what they need. Because at the end of the day, we're here to serve them. We don't put ourselves first. They and their families come first. And I would add, and Liz knows, I put this survey out and I had 615 people vote. And the question was, how many Black educators in K through 12 and at the post-secondary level have you had? And we know that education is 80% white. And I'm not saying white is bad at all. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of children sitting in classrooms like I had to from K through 12 and never saw one Black educator, not one. And representation matters, and the data backs that up, that if a child who is a child of color does more and fares better if they have someone who looks like themselves. And we had over 50% of people out of 615 people that there was 20% that never had a Black educator. There was 18% that had one in their whole career. There were 60% that had two. I had people on there that told me, I've been in school for 25 years and I never had a Black educator, ever. So I think the impact of that is what we're seeing now. So I would start with hearts and minds and speaking up and getting uncomfortable to make it comfortable for all.
Thank you. That's a lot. You know, when I hear all these things, they sound like they're giving us hope. But beneath that, I think about power structure. Someone who may have the idea that could change our world for better may not necessarily have the power to do that. And if the person tries too hard, the person will be muzzled out by the powerful establishments. Unfortunately, I'm yet to find a way other than just to shame, which often doesn't lead to the answers we need. There's a saying that goes that experience is the best teacher. I still believe that experience is the best teacher. So by extension, I would say that what Future articulated a few minutes ago underscores the importance of it. And also a point she made that is worthy of repeating when she talked about that certain percentage of school teachers are white. And oftentimes some people misconceptualize that term when it's used. One of the best people I know in education, Geneva Gay, who taught in your school like Wisconsin as well as Washington State University, is one of the icons in the area of cultural diversity. And she came with what she titled as cultural responsive teaching. And cultural responsive teaching is a very important area that everyone who is in teaching profession ought to get into. But I also want to say, for those of you who are Black, white, and other colors in between, I want you to stay focused on the issues. Never misinterpret data people use to describe a white or black. We are all in this together. And the only way we can make a dent is when all of us are united to fighting systemic racism that still exists as we talk today. Fight those who tend to deny that it doesn't exist. Look into ourselves and continue to move forward. And to that, I'm gonna go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, it's funny that as I look at you, look at your name, it says FutureCain. So I wanna underscore that so that everyone who is here will recognize Elizabeth and distinguish her from the other one I see, FutureCain. It seems like I see two FutureCains here.
Yeah,
And
I don't know why it's doing that.
right. The good news is that I know both of them, so I can distinguish them, and I'm trying to use that to help you distinguish them too, in case you have any question for them. So Elizabeth, from hearing you last time, and as a matter of fact, one of my closest friends, who was also my mentor, Dr. Gerald Feinstein, he's here. He sent me an article. I believe that article, as I read it, it was, it reflected you and how you see African American and the people who talk about the story. So with that in mind, I want to ask you, could you tell us the kind of things you're doing? Because I would say, by virtue of hearing you last time, that you're well-grounded in the area of knowing whom you are. A lot of people don't know whom you are. And I know why, in part because of the story I've had. You said that you were forcibly profiled, arrested, and all the terrible things that go along with that. It happened to you. And those things, they've cumulatively helped to shape whom you become. So my question to you is, what are you doing to maximize the effectiveness of what you do, and perhaps get as many people as you can get along with you, because this journey we are in requires massive number of people. Could you tell us that, please?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I grew up actually I'm from the UK. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale in a predominantly Black community. So I'm an immigrant. So I look at African American studies and culture and African studies, I think, through a very different lens, in that I feel as though the African diaspora is connected. And in order to understand who I am as a person, I definitely have to understand where I came from. As Maya Angelou said, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you came from. And I know that my history didn't start with slavery on the soils of America, in that my history was so much more inclusive than that. So when I was in high school, I learned a lot about African origins from Sheikh Anta Diop. I read a lot from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I read autobiography of Malcolm X, everything that my teachers could give us, because they really were invested. I had a lot of Black teachers. So unlike the survey that Future talked about, I was probably one of the very few. I think the stats that I've seen recently, and they support what Future said, is that 40% of K through 12 students are at either predominantly Black or predominantly white schools, which means that even though segregation is illegal in schools, and that was established with the Civil Rights Act of 1955, largely our schools still have remained segregated. So my formulation of who I am as a person, and understanding the greatness and the richness and the strength in African American history and African culture, came from teachers in those predominantly Black middle and high schools that I attended, that were invested. As Future said, it's a matter of, if you can see it, you can be it. Our Vice President, Kamala Harris, of mixed descent also, South Asian, and also her dad is Jamaican, like my parents are Jamaican, stated that there was a statistic that was out there: by third grade, if a student has a teacher that is Black or reflects them, then they're much more likely to graduate from high school. So all the studies and statistics do support that our Black and brown students have needs that are very different from students in the dominant culture. And unfortunately, we know that those in the dominant culture, recent surveys also show that 75 to 80% of them don't have a friend who is Black, don't associate with people that are Black. Future and myself are unique in that we are in multiracial families. My husband is Italian, he's white. My 2 children are biracial. So I have to navigate how to be a parent who is sensitive and understanding of the fact that my children also are spanning, just like Future does, 2 different cultures, and how I sensitively navigate all of that by instilling pride in them, but also understanding that they are of very prideful. My husband's very proud Italian, but he also understands the beauty, and he every single minute tells me about the beauty and how much he loves Black culture. He actually, since he was 17, works in a Black barbershop. So he can cut a fade, do an edge up, do designs, anything that you could think of. He loves Black culture. And I think that's a part of the problem. We don't have those in a dominant culture. We don't call it appropriation. We call that love. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that was one of the things I was like, okay, this is my husband after like the first or second date. So Future, I thought it was a kind of creepy thing that he wanted to put a ring on it after the first date, but I went along with it. So I think there is a lack of empathy. Maybe there's a lack of understanding. There's a lack of embracing Black culture and understanding that white shouldn't be the default. We shouldn't have to really qualify that our Black children need Black teachers. That should just be a matter of fact that if someone sees something and they are able to model that, just like a mentor relationship. If me as a woman wanted a woman mentor, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid at that. But for some reason, when we try to push for more Black teachers, we know that in higher education, only 5% of faculty are Black. In higher education, only 7% of administrators are Black. So also the only place that in higher education, Black folk are overrepresented is in adjunct faculty, of which I'm one. I teach as an adjunct, and I'm also full-time working as an instructional designer at my college, but we don't have the representation needed. And a lot of that is what propelled me to be more intentional in thinking about the ways that we need to teach Black history, which is why my experience when I was at University of Florida, even though I went to predominantly Black high school, I went to PWI, University of Florida, and that was where I was arrested. I went into an Eckerd's, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, and that was where CNN reached out to me and asked me to write an op-ed piece for their website over Thanksgiving weekend. That op-ed piece had over 2 million hits on their website. I received probably over 100 emails on my job because people hunted me down and wanted to give me their feedback on my article, which basically compared the idea that Kyle Rittenhouse, a young man of the dominant culture, was given a lot of accolades, a lot of support, was given $2 million in GoFundMe money raised primarily by Ricky Schroeder and the My Pillow guy to get him so that he could be released from jail after he admittedly killed 2 people and wounded another with an AR-15 that was purchased illegally. And I think a lot of people reached out and said that I should not be open to the idea that he should have a second chance. But the argument really wasn't that he should be able to have a second chance. The argument was that all children, if they make mistakes, and in this case, this was not a mistake. It was that he shot somebody, so it wouldn't even be considered a mistake. It was something that he willfully did, but his argument, his lawyer's argument, self-defense. However, point being that Tamir Rice didn't have that opportunity to explain himself. We have many, Breonna Taylor, we have many young people that are not allowed to make mistakes. Myself, when I entered the Echo Drugs, I was stopped after the article, after the theft detector, the anti-theft detector beeped. I had not purchased anything. I went into the store, you know, this was Stone Age times, because I went into the store to drop off some film. And when I left through the door, the alarm beeped and I was asked to come back to the counter and asked if I purchased anything, which I said no. I walked in and out, and they asked me to open up my book bag to show what I had, and I found a pack of batteries, which I had purchased, and could not. They asked me to present the receipt, which it was in there, but it had been purchased a couple of days ago, so I couldn't find it. And at that point, they called the police and told me I was going to jail for stealing a $2.49 pack of batteries because I was not able to present anything to show the contrary. They asked me to sign a no trespass warning, which meant that I should admit that I stole the batteries and that I could never come in the store again, and I refused. And at that point, they called the police. The police gave me another opportunity to sign the document, which I told them I would not, because that was not true. And at that point, they took me to jail. I had to post bond. My mom drove from Fort Lauderdale after she posted my bond, and spent about a few hours in holding just to be able to post, and was released after that. And it was my first exposure to the idea that was not fair, that I would be profiled. And my lawyer stated, and I pursued a civil lawsuit against Ecker Drugs and won that lawsuit. After the charges were dropped, I found the receipt. Actually, when my mom picked me up from jail, I rifled again through the book bag and found it inside a folder, the receipt for that item. So it was there the whole time, but I just couldn't find it. So that was, I think, what informed to Dr. Joseph's question about why I'm so outspoken about social justice, about racial profiling, about police brutality. So I've seen and witnessed things with my own eyes that lead me to believe that the system is disadvantaging our Black and Brown students. And that was another reason why I started the Black History and Culture Academy, because people are unaware of the struggle and don't want to come to grips with the idea that we need to inform ourselves. If we don't inform ourselves, then these types of situations will continue to happen again and again. Black and Brown children will continue to be racially profiled and killed, even because society does not understand that they should be treated equally and given the same benefit of the doubt. Khalif Browder sat in Rikers Island for 3 years, 2 of which he was in solitary confinement, and killed himself, committed suicide by hanging after he was released for supposedly stealing a book bag. And that was really what prompted me to write the story, because I was like, a book bag is at the heart of these situations. Something so trivial can cause someone to literally lose their life.
Thank you so much. You know, I would have followed with so many questions, because I think Joseph, you know, Elizabeth and Future, you guys are great. I wish I could go further with the deeper questions, but at this point, I would like to give our audience, we have incredible people in the audience. So let's try and get some questions from the audience. Can somebody ask question, or do you want me to start pointing at people that I know have questions in their heads?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ramirez. You raised your hand.
Okay. Well, you were speaking up. Go ahead, Karina. I'll wait till after you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Karine O'Date. I am an advisor at Medgar Evers College, and I was very, very taken with Elizabeth's presentation in terms of the way she articulated her experience. And you sound very grounded. You look younger than I am. Don't let the picture fool you. But you sound so grounded. And I am just immensely pleased to see that you use the experience to propel yourself forward and to bring in more people into the conversation with respect to what Black history has and has not been in the United States. And I wanted to know, going forward, have you had a lot of opportunities to work with higher education institutions with respect to bringing more of that to the forefront?
That's a really excellent question. I just launched Black History and Culture Academy. It's a platform, a managed platform that I literally just, at the end of last year, people kept telling me, you're posting so much on LinkedIn, all these Black history facts and so much about stats and how Black folk are marginalized. And historically, a lot of people didn't know what redlining was. A lot of people didn't know that Black folk just don't congregate in certain neighborhoods. A lot of that has been something that, just like slavery, just like any other institution, whether it's segregation, those are largely propagated by law. And then that law literally just continues to disparately affect those in these marginalized communities, which is where a lot of folk, I think, tend to feel like, well, Black folk just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And like Martin Luther King said, it's really sad to ask someone that doesn't have bootstraps or even boots to pull themselves up by them, right? Future and myself talk about the idea that, you know, you've never even seen a boot, you know, or maybe you have flip-flops on, and that person that's owning the boot store is telling you go pull yourself up by your boots. So I think that part of what's happened in terms of my trying to put that out there and trying to make sure that people understand Black history has been propelled by the idea that a lot of people are just not aware of basic facts about Black history. I have not, the platform launched about a month ago. I actually launched it on the day of the insurrection at the Capitol. So that's how I remember the date, because I was wrapped up in my bed like a burrito and I had a headache. And I think Future called me and I couldn't even answer the phone because I was so struck by what I saw. And I've had, right now, as of in the past month, I've had 120 students enroll in the program. It's subscription-based, where you're able to get like a Netflix-style exposure to 20 micro courses, which I designed myself as an instructional designer. I have about almost a decade's worth of experience in designing courses. I've had a lot of positive feedback and have actually received feedback from students that are in the program to keep improving it. But I have not had so far any interest from higher education. I definitely would be open to the idea of collaborating with those in the higher education sphere in order to bring these types of classes, these types of micro-learning, or even expanding them into longer form programs. I've seen, just from my own experience working in higher ed, as well as the research that I did prior to rolling out the program, that there just is not a lot of widespread adoption of Black history as a curriculum in higher education. And obviously I did state the statistics as far as K through 12. So we have a lot of work to be done to answer your question. And I definitely am open to collaborating with anyone that wants to help me to get this out to the mainstream, because I do believe that there's a lot that needs to be accomplished in terms of us having an accurate history. Just seeing what happened at the Capitol lets us know that if people think that's being patriotic, or people believe that that is what our country was founded on, that they really don't understand that our country was largely founded on the backs of Black enslaved Africans, and that Black folk have done so much to build this country, but are typically villainized and demonized and have not been paid fairly, don't have access to adequate health care, as we've seen with COVID, have been marginalized in literally every single area of well-being, whether it's maternal outcomes, whether it's infant mortality rates, whether it's access to health care, whether it's being paid fairly, whether it's being in the C-suite in leadership positions, whether it's being hired in less than minimum wage. We're overrepresented in minimum wage, but not in professional fields. Whether it's access to education, there isn't an achievement gap. There's no accessibility. Our students really don't even have the access. And if you don't have access and you don't have the ability to even be in the conversation in terms of higher education, you've never seen that, then we have a whole sector of, like Dr. Noai said, students that are not going to be the next generation of leaders. 50% of students of color will be our leadership and will be in schools, but what are we doing to prepare them? Where are the resources? What are we doing to make sure they have Black teachers so that those Black teachers can guide them and be mentors to them? There's just so many areas that need to be addressed. And like you, I feel like history is definitely the first foundation, because we have too many people saying this society is a meritocracy. We have too many people saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you have access to education. And those of us that work in the field and do this work know that that's absolutely not true.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I just wanted to add that, I can tell you that as someone who works at a predominantly Black college, a lot of our students, even though we are a predominantly Black college, and yes, while they do have access to Black history, I would still say that a lot of them are lacking with respect to what is really our history, And so even within a Black community, there is still room to heighten awareness of what our history has been and why we continue to struggle with certain systematic issues. And
okay, can somebody else get in questions? If you could, shorten your questions so that you can get in as many questions as we can. I see Karen, Dr. Walker here. Dr. Walker, I think you probably agree with me. There's someone I'm working with as we are speaking now. We are looking at what makes people become involved, learn about what may be happening to other people. And what we are finding out is, by and large, is the relationship you develop amongst people. When people put their guards down, then you'll be able to see the pain that oftentimes is hidden, that nobody knows. Now, the individuals I'm working with now, hopefully we're gonna get some sort of report on that. They're like white people who really believe in fairness, equity, and social justice for all. And the death of George Floyd actually exposed them to things that they had never seen before. And I think that it really underscores it. And these people I'm working with now are people who have relationship, either their children or their relatives that are connected with people of other race. So they began to see the pain and anguish that is often only associated with the experience of African Americans from firsthand. Then when they see those things, they say, this is not who I want to be. This is not what I want to be. And Dr. Walker is someone I know very well. And Dr. Walker, I'm just wondering whether you have questions for this, for them.
Sure. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut anyone off by any means, and I appreciate everyone's time and stories. Most of my work I do is with organizations, and I like to say help people to have adult conversations. But I do think that the George Floyd, his passing really opened up a lot of people's eyes, just not societies, but within organizations. But I think it made everyone have to talk about things that they didn't talk about for a very long time. But hearing your story, Elizabeth, I think was impactful to me, but it just brought up questions around what I hear more so deep rooted, I think, for people at work, but people in general, because people at work are people, and me being multiracial also. My mother is white and Spanish, my father being Black and Japanese. But I think people, also have questions around, just the socioeconomic piece, right? I mean, I think social injustice has a lot to do also with I think the economic elements more so too that are built into the system of our education and our eligibility to have access to things. And sometimes that has something to do with race and sometimes it doesn't. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, what types of questions do you get around that, or what types of issues do you deal with around that, that people sometimes say, I came from nothing also, right? And it didn't have anything to do with race. Just curious.
I've had that response many times because I post about the disparities in education, and I have had many people, especially those in a dominant culture, that maybe have overcome. And I think when we, in Future and I talk about this all the time, when we talk about Black folk having to overcome inequity, we're not saying that other people haven't had it hard or haven't struggled or haven't even been in a poor environment where they haven't had access to resources. And I think sometimes, like you said, that message becomes obscured because people will say, well, my family was poor, or, I had people that discriminated against me for the neighborhood I grew up in, or because of my religion, or whatever the case may be. I think it's really important to distinguish between individual struggle, and myself and Future have talked about this many times, that anyone, regardless of race, creed, or color, or religion, can struggle on an individual level. But what we're talking about is systemically, that Black folk are at the bottom of every indicator for well-being, like I said earlier. So when we think about the socioeconomic aspects of it, that's absolutely true, that it is very tied. Poverty is very tied to Blackness. And why is that? Because as a measure of those Black folk that were emancipated in 1865, they didn't have access to land. And you had immigrants that were coming over from Europe, land grant, that were given access to land, that were given land, the 40 acres and a mule, and that promise of being able to integrate into society is something that Black folk have just never been given. So you're talking about generational wealth. So if your family, some people say, well, my family came over from Europe and, you know, my husband's family is Italian. So my family came over from Europe and we had to struggle too. Yeah, that's true. But there were systems that were put in place by the government to help to bolster some of these other groups that were simply not available to Black folk. So when we think about systemically, if your family even came through Ellis Island, if your family is an immigrant, my family is an immigrant, and my struggle is very different. So it's no way that I can compare coming from the UK, where it's two pounds to $1, and say that I had it, even though I didn't have it hard, that I had the exact same struggle as someone who generationally is here and has generational trauma and dealt with so many issues passed down from generation to generation of lynching, of segregation, of not legally not having access. We know that today, schools that are suburban spend $2,000 per student, and schools that are in urban areas where predominantly Black and brown folks live spend $1,000 per student. So how can that education be equal? That would be impossible, because my high school that I went to was 90% Black, and we had like 2 guidance counselors for 2,000 students. A lot of the classrooms didn't have adequate books. A lot of the instructors tend to be, for those of you that work in K through 12, if you're in a school that predominantly serves Black and brown students, those tend to be sometimes first year teachers, don't have as much resources and access to training, to ongoing development, to mentoring that you may see in a more predominantly white or the majority culture area, suburban area. And that's because of property taxes. And typically how K through 12 is funded is through property taxes. And obviously we know that properties in predominantly white areas tend to, by an appraiser that works for the state, be appraised at a higher value. If my home is in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale, my house is statistically, this is not an opinion, going to usually be valued by the state appraiser less than that same exact home in a predominantly white neighborhood. They've done many studies all over the country that support that, and even had a woman, and I think Future and I talked about this, who just as an experiment, when she saw that her house wasn't appraising and she was in a biracial marriage with a multiracial family, took all of her pictures of her and her husband out of the house. And when she did that, the appraiser that came in valued the home $50,000 or whatever it was more than when her pictures were in the home. And how demoralized she felt, because systemically there is racism that is affecting Black folk statistically across the board. So that individual person that has to study, that has suffered and has to overcome adversity, cannot compare to all of the Black folk in America. And that's usually what I try to explain to folk, is that when we talk about the Black struggle, we're not saying that other folk haven't struggled, but overall across the board, Black folks struggle more, and that's just statistically proven.
I'm wondering if I just jump in quickly with one statistic from Wisconsin that's connected to education specifically, Dr. Walker, because that conversation happens all the times with individuals and teams as I'm coaching. Like the discussion about race always is, there's always an attempt to deflect to wealth. But if we look at the data in Wisconsin, even of our middle class Black families and free and reduced white kiddos, they're outperforming Black students. So there's something more there. We have to go deeper and look at the system and have conversation about bias and assumptions that teachers are making in the systems are.
Joseph, I'll add too, for Wisconsin, I'm pretty sure the data will also show that students who have an IEP will outperform too. And in addition, for our state, it's very important to us because we are continuously rated either #1 or #2 of the worst place to raise a Black family, the worst.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of comments here. One person was saying that, do you think that Blacks and Browns should become more teachers, that it will alleviate the situation? And I would like to just say this. I do believe that it's not a matter of Black or white or brown. The issue is lack of adequate preparation. We are all social cultured in our own communities. If you come from a small town where you don't know anything nothing about African Americans. You don't know anything about Asian Americans. You don't know about everyone else except that small place you are in. What will happen is that it shapes your belief system, and you cannot divorce it from your behavior. And the other person talked about, Dr. Ingram made a comment about the problem is that the union absorbed, the South instead of outlawing them. I think I agree with it completely, because just like what is happening now, when you see certain people, they kind of, do all kinds of things and get away with it. And instead of dealing with them on basis of what they've violated, we sort of, let them get away with it, and it continues. So I would say that that's a big mistake by letting the union letting the so-called, Southern strategies to begin to do all kinds of harmful things they've done to this society. Okay, would you, any more questions from them? Or I think Ingram, it seems like you have a question.
Ramirez has been waiting. He has been waiting very patiently. So I just want to point that out.
Oh, who?
Alfred has.
Okay, Alfred, I'm sorry. Dr. Ingram, could you, hold off? Let's hear from this one. We know every work you are doing on this is grounded that you can use it later, but let's hear from Alfred. Alfred, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted a few comments, and I guess it'll rise to a question. So I very much relate to today. I just found out about it from someone else who was on a previous webinar with me and invited me. So thank you all. I grew up in East LA. I'm Chicano, of Mexican descent, born in LA. And I was one of those others. I grew up in East LA, Compton, and Watts. Just for living there, you got labeled. And so I've had to navigate the systems, and to the point where I went to college and became an admissions officer as well as someone else there. But, I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have any history. The border crossed me. Mexico was, the US was Mexico. But I had to come back to community college after my freshman year. I went to Columbia University. I got a scholarship there. And to learn about my history. So I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't know. I felt internalized oppression. Didn't know to call it that. Institutional racism and structural racism. I was bearing all the weight of that and didn't know what it was. But I got stopped plenty of times for driving while brown or walking in Kmart. So I feel you, Elizabeth, for that situation. So all that's to say that I'm really looking. I wanted to ask. About the work we're looking to do across BIPOC communities, and in the same breath as we talk about Black Lives Matter or Asians being persecuted right now and attacked for the flu, the Asian flu. There's so much partnering and collaboration, and even words we choose and populations we bring into the conversation that really will help us as a power, as a mass. Really affect change. And I didn't know if either one of you had any, or anyone, any thoughts on that.
Okay. I have a lot to say, I guess.
And I said, I'm sorry I said so much, so I'm sorry for asking so much.
It's okay. That's a really broad and deep question, right, is what I'll say. Because I think Liz and I take the stance of we are all in this together, right? It's in Ubuntu. I am because we are, and we know that. And we also know that then what are we doing to say we have differences, but we're also in this joint fight to move forward. And I would say Liz believes this too. It's education. Do you care if I share our secret for next week? Okay. So basically what Liz and I have chosen to do, because we want to educate, is we said we have to create something to help people, because we've been getting a lot of asks of how do I become, or how do I help you? Whether it's the brown people, the Black people, any oppressed, because this fight that we're fighting isn't just for Black and brown people. It's any ism and any ist. There's a lot. it's all encompassing for us, this fight. So what we said, what we're going to do is we're going to open ally to accomplice webinar to work with people, because you need to go on a journey. It is a lifelong journey. And I think that's where it begins. It begins with exposing yourself to people and things that maybe make you feel uncomfortable, but it will broaden you as a person to a better being, so that you do know where to start. Because I think there's a lot of people, as we said, 80% of people have no Black friends. So you don't know where to begin, and that's okay. But Liz and I have both been on this journey with many people. So we just want to help people if they would like to have the support to walk shoulder to shoulder with us, because we have many years more to go in this good fight.
Thank you. Is Dr. Ingram, could you come up with the question you were? I thought you were trying to ask a question.
No, I had a couple students in the classroom, so I was talking to them. They were listening and they were interested in what everybody had to say. So that's really cool. Of course, they have a lot of opinions, and anytime that we have a presentation, I like to involve them in the conversation.
Excellent.
So yeah, I mean, you know, I can go on and on about this topic, and I feel very strongly about the technocratic public school system, and I really feel like parents need to empower themselves and take control over their own child's education, and take the power and control out of the hands of the government. When I taught in middle school, I also taught at the local jail, and I would go from the middle school, and then after school I would teach at the jail, and the similarities were uncanny. I have never been in a jail before. That was the first time I had been in, was when I was going in to teach, and I was really scared. I was really nervous, but I knew it was something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And then, you know, after a few times, you really don't even think about, you know, that you're in a jail anymore. When you start teaching, they're your students. They're not inmates. They're learning. They're not serving time. And, you know, your teacher heart just takes over, and you do what you got to do to help your students learn. And I did last teaching at the prison, and I love it. I can't go in right now because of Corona. They locked down because of the COVID, but I will definitely be back as soon as they let me back in. But I'll tell you where I did not last, and that was at the public middle school. I lasted about 1 month, and I was out of there. And the reason why is because, you know, the classroom areas are called pods. I go to the jail, their areas are called pods. You know, they walk down the hallway lined up and can't speak. Same thing in the jail. You know, there's police officers and security guards, and they bring in the dogs at public school, and they have the same thing in the jail. And it's just uncanny to me, the level of, I wouldn't say I was naive, but maybe on the other hand I was, because I really had no idea. I had no idea. And when you know better, you do better. And when you open your eyes and you take the chance and take the opportunity to educate yourself, you know, on certain things that you would have never known anyways, then it really opens your eyes. And I realized that I can never fully understand so much of what people go through in life, but I do realize that I can have empathy for other human beings. And I feel like taking the power away from the government when it comes to our children and our education is really where we need to be, because why do they get to say what gets taught? Why do they get to say who's going to be spending 7 hours a day with our children? It really doesn't make sense. And at the same time, you know, parents blame the teachers, and the teachers blame the parents, and nobody goes into teaching to make money, okay? Everybody goes into teaching because they have a passion for teaching and they want to help children learn and they love it. But it seems like over the course of so many years, being stuck in the technocratic system changes you, and I see it. And I see people who are probably lovely, young, optimistic people really get sour and really get pessimistic and really turn on each other and on the children and on the parents. And it just changes you as a human being, and I see it. And it's really sad. And I feel like our education system is so toxic and so broken. And teachers are expected to do so much and not appreciated and not compensated enough for their time. And not only that, but they're really not understanding the big picture. Like when it comes to intrinsic bias and learning about multicultural and diversity and empathy building, you're completely right. They do not get the training that they need. And even if they did get the training that they need, it seems like the cycle of abuse that they get stuck in, where it's always blame, 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 blame. You know, I think that changes someone as a human being. So I don't know if I'm really making any sense, but this is what I see. And I feel like if parents would take, you know, control of their own child's education, maybe make community schools, maybe somebody in your community can unschool or homeschool or create a community school and base it on that. And I don't know if the government will give us tax credits or not give us tax credits. But we need to be willing to pay for what we want. Expecting a free public education and expecting it to be what we want and what we need and what we expect, no one's going to agree on that. Nobody. So I hope that change comes, and I hope that you know, we can move forward as a more of a progressive society, because come on, like, give me a break. We spend billions and billions on military, but compared to, you know, we won't give our teachers pencils to make sure that we have supplies, and it's just like insane. So yeah, I just feel like not relying on the government, empowering yourselves, taking ownership of your own child's education. And of course, everybody wants better schools, but they don't want taxes raised either. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a catch-22. You have to pay, you know, for what you want. You can't expect something to get something for free. Yet again, we are paying taxes. Yet again, why is so much spent on the military? It's just all a big mess, really, in my opinion. And in the meantime, I feel like a occupation that is predominantly female ends up in the cycle of abuse in a technocratic system. Now, if it was all men, would we still see the same thing? If mainly men were teachers and it was run more like a business, would they get it, you know, feel that way? I don't know. But these are all questions that, you know, we can ask ourselves and ponder, and gives a different perspective anyway.
I think you had a lot of questions in there, but what I can say is that if you look at the whole structure from the beginning to this time, if you look closely, there are not much changes. I say that because if you go back to the Jeffersonian days, the educational system were divided into two parts. Those who were trained to be thinkers, to be decision makers, versus those who were trained to take instruction. So those that were being groomed to be decision makers were given some leeway to think, to question. But if you go to those who were trained to be, you know, to take instruction and do what they're told to do, they simply were trained to take instruction and do what they were told to do. And if you fast forward to the present day, to some extent, is still happening. And when you go to what Dr. Ingram was saying about, do this. Well, the question is, can you do it alone? We have infrastructure of the system that is set. People who are in school board may know nothing about effective curriculum or strategies for teaching, but they're there, they're making decisions. And see somebody who may be in a smaller environment where the person cannot really adequately express the issues in the first place. They purport to be caring for them, but the fact is, at least from my perspective, I may be wrong, but I doubt it. They don't. So we are in this kind of really, really big situation that I don't know. It's something that my view is that we're gonna, first of all, get to those people who may be poor and train them on their strength to facilitate change, to frighten those who are in power that they will lose their power unless they do what they need to do, because they are all elected to do what they need to do. But unfortunately, I can't say that they do those things. So it's very difficult to say to somebody, do this or do that. It's like getting to somebody who is homeless and say, why didn't you dress up and tie up and go to job? Well, the person has to get water to wash, to clean the person's face, to brush the person. These are different lives. And unfortunately, the establishment tend not to factor these things into the equation. Mr. Hale. Mr. Hale, can I? All right.
The mute
okay.
actually works there, good doctor. That's what happened. Can you hear me?
Not a lot. Lift your volume up, please.
Mr. Hale, we can't hear you, man. Stop wasting our time.
Can you hear me now?
I think I hear you.
You cannot hear me? All right. 1 second.
Does any person have more, question or questions?
Can I just say something to what you talked about before in regards to the system? Here's what I want people to just understand. If there's educators out there listening to us right now, or parents or grandparents or guardians or aunts, uncles, whoever it is, I don't want anybody to take away from this. It is a system, and I think we all agree. But we also have to know, because Liz and I are in this, we've been in this for a long time. I know that one person could impact change too, right? That teacher in that classroom could make a small change to have a child feel valued, feel heard, feel loved, feel better about themselves as an individual. A parent can do that through educating at home. Now, there's lots of work to do in regards to the internal educational systems, but I don't want any individual educator or educational leader or parent to feel like, well, I can't move forward because I need a bunch of people to help me move forward. You could still impact change, whether it's you speaking up at your parent-teacher conferences or you speaking up at the board meetings that you go to say, I'm seeing this. One person can get this car and bus moving.
I agree.
And I think the empowerment piece, I know Karen and I are on the same page with that, is parents can take control of their own children's destiny. My high school, she was in high school, now she's in college. She did high school online, so she virtually did her high school year. She did not attend public school because we just felt like it was the best option for her. And now my 6-year-old, I'm unschooling. So I'm not using a standard curriculum. If he goes to a grocery store with me, maybe he learns, how to navigate in the grocery store, whatever the case may be. You don't have to necessarily stick with whatever that curriculum is. You don't have to necessarily even put your children in public school if that's an option, because I do think that parents need to have more empowerment. And like Karen said, there is a school to prison pipeline. Future and I have discussed this many times, where brown and black, particularly black students, are suspended at higher rates. They're expelled at higher rates. There is that idea of they're not being taught critical thinking skills. They're having to sit still for, I think a lot of the things that we even do in society in terms of stifling a child because they're in a classroom for 7 hours. I personally, even as an educator, did not want that for my son. And I just felt like this is counterproductive and counterintuitive. And I think Ramon jumped off, but the idea of community schools, the idea of, I know someone that's very active, RGB Academy, where all they do is teach, that she has her own group of parents and they all bring their children, and she teaches African studies and she has an African framework in terms of that whole idea of community. So there are a lot of alternate, but I think that Future's right, that one person can make a difference. But I also think that the larger structures that are in place do need to change, because there are parents that are working a minimum wage job and homeschooling is just not an option. I'm lucky that I can teach my son and I work from home, but someone that maybe works at Walmart and she's a single mom and she's just trying to make it may not have the opportunity to do that. So what happens to her son? Is he going to be criminalized? Is he going to be in the school to prison pipeline? There has to be something that we can do on a structural level also to change the structures. And it does seem overwhelming, but I think raising voices and conversations like this are the first step in that process.
Thank you. I think we have taken so much time, but going back to what you said about an individual having to make a difference. One American anthropologist, Margaret Mead, said that an individual can do so much. And sometimes an individual who ignites the fire that will change it. I'm paraphrasing here. So for those of you who may think I'm not putting him directly, but rather her, but she's a very powerful person that her comment about what an individual can do is something we have to reflect, and as you know, we advocate for this. Well, I want to say that we've passed time way much that I can say, but I want to thank all of you. You guys are phenomenal. Our guests are just incredible. So I really appreciate it. And for those of you that came, thank you so much. And you can stay tuned because we still have, I think we have 6 sessions for this African American week. Today is the 3rd one, so we still have 3 to go. So on that note, thank you very much.
Joseph, can I answer Mr. Hill's question if he has it?
Sure. Oh, just a second. Yeah, Mr. Hill has something tonight, 4:30. I can't even wait to go there. And I forgot to. Mr. Hill, can you put it on the chat so that people can copy it, because it's good. I don't say that it's good if it's not good. So I ask you to go and see for yourself.
I think, can y'all hear me now, by the way?
Now, yeah.
Great. So what I wanted to say to the audience real quick, and it's piggybacking off of, is it Elizabeth? Because I have 2 futures on the screen here, so I want to make sure I'm saying your name right. But Elizabeth, you spoke with such great passion about this micro-learning thing. And I'm from the great state of Mississippi, and I taught myself history. And the reason why I did that, just for the audience knowledge, I had a teacher named Miss Burroughs, older white lady. Keeping in mind, I'm 56 years old. So I was born the same year as the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So this act is about 10 years old as I'm in this school I'm telling you about. Miss Burroughs is clearly in her 60s. She's old school. She had no affinity for African-American students, let me just say. So what she would do would intentionally call on the person she knew the least in terms of Black students. She would purposely pick out, in this case, Donald Draper. I remember like it was yesterday. So the reason why I learned so much about history, because I always wanted to be able to blurt out the answer when I knew Donald wouldn't know. So I would do extra studying. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was in defense of my race. At the young age of 13, I realized now what I was doing back then. But the point I wanted to make, Dr. Nwoye, was not about that. That's just the backdrop. It's when we teach diversity and inclusion, or at least when I do, I try to do it in a historical context. You see, I can't tell you about redlining if you don't understand the word great. Great appears twice in American history, and both times to the detriment of Black folks. The Great Betrayal, 1877, when we decided in the House of Representatives that Rutherford B. Hayes would become the president. when a Southerner had really won. But what the South wanted was the removal of troops. When they did that, the poor Black person was left to the Ku Klux Klan for the next 90 plus years. Imagine what's going to happen now. The second great, and this is the most important great, is the Great Depression. From 1933 to 1935, 4 major pieces of legislation were passed that built the wealth gap, the housing gap, the education gap. How so? Social Security Act, 1935. It was passed, and it was purposely said, if you were a domestic servant or a farmer, you could not be included. Who were they targeting? Sharecroppers and Black women that worked in white people's houses. The National Labor Act was passed so that you can get union wages. Now you're building the wealth gap because Blacks can't be in unions. The Housing Act, the Federal Housing Act, if you've never heard of redlining, this was the law. This wasn't just individual banks doing this. This was the federal government training people on how to discriminate. It was the law. And the last piece that really put Black folks in a hole, it looked good on paper. They were paying white farmers to farm less so that they could raise the price of food. But who was farming? Sharecroppers. If you're growing less food, you need less sharecroppers. So it is not by coincidence that the Great Migration corresponds with the Great Depression, because all the New Deal did was make bad things worse if you happen to be African American. And the last thing I will point out is, Elizabeth, you made the point about other immigrants saying, well, what about me when it comes to racism? And you did a great job of pointing out that's an individual thing, and we acknowledge that that is true for you. But you didn't take that next logical leap. I was on the edge of my seat waiting on you to say it. I cannot change when I walk out the house what color I am. But if I'm Jewish, I can deny my religion if I think it's going to save my life. If I'm Irish, I can learn English over time and get rid of my accent. But I don't give a damn what Pete Hill does. I can't stop being Black. And in this country, in every country around the world, we are susceptible to sensory perception. And if I have already designated a skin color as evil, as bad, as a detriment to society, I've been all over the world as a soldier, and I don't give a damn where I've gone. I've not been a soldier. I was always a Black soldier, bottom line. And so all I'm pointing out to the audience is, again, this is why I'm so proud that this country is coming together now, where you are intertwining this thing when we say people of color, for instance, that we're now saying these things are interconnected. Because as long as you leave these things separate, you're going to come up with separate solutions that will always be inherently unequal. Because my problem standing alone might not concern a Hispanic person. A Hispanic person just talking about their issue might not concern a Chinese person. But when you look at it holistically, and we see even white people, you understand I don't succeed unless you do. That's why they call us the United States, not the individual states. So that was my 99-cent word, Dr. Nwoye.
Thank you so much. I guess you saved this for the last.
Well, that's because my microphone wasn't working.
You intentionally stopped it from our hearing you, so that you be the last. You were successful.
I didn't pitch my show tonight or with Earl Breon. The Earl and the Man show is at 4:30 this evening. We have robust conversations. There should be a link in the chat box. But tonight we're talking about cognitive diversity. Is that the new cover for those who really don't believe in diversity? So it's a controversial subject. We would love to hear your thoughts about that. Is cognitive diversity the new way of covering up doing the real work of equality? Because as long as we have diverse thoughts, we're done, right?
Well,
here we are.
You guys can hear him, so stay tuned for tonight's show. They do it every Friday, 4:30 to 5:30. So if you could go to the chat room, copy the link, place it wherever you feel like you can keep it, and attend it. I think you'll be pleased that you do. Okay. On that note, again, I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. And you are the, epitome of what the founders envisioned that we are yet to live. So I'll say to you, push on forward until we realize those wonderful words. On that note, this session is ended.